Hello everybody, welcome back to another episode of Shane's Squirrel Shack. I want to thank you all for being here today as always, and today we're going to be talking about what it was like for me having autism and bipolar in college. I got this request from a friend of mine who I met in college, and it's been a long time coming for me to make this video, and I finally want to get it out of the way. Also, this last weekend I got to see some friends who I met in college, so I've kind of just been reflecting, borderline feeling nostalgia about that kind of time. Even though there really wasn't a lot, I look back on like, man, I missed this. So we're gonna get rocking and rolling into this right away. First of all, I went to 3 colleges around the state of Wisconsin. You might as well make a world tour shirt of where I went, you know what I'm saying? So we're gonna start back, we're gonna go back, what, about like, 7 years ago now. We're gonna start there. So at this point, I didn't have a bipolar diagnosis. I didn't have that until my 3rd college. I graduated high school, and I was going to be going to University of Wisconsin, Oshkosh. I went there because I was looked at by, and had the interest of a cross-country coach over there, and that was my big passion at the time, was cross-country and track. And I really didn't have much direction going into this next chapter of my life. I just kind of felt like I went to where I was wanted. I wanted to go to another university and pursue music and all of that, but that didn't work out, and who knows what my future would have been if I went in that direction. And honestly, in the long story short, I'm really glad that I had all of these experiences in retrospect that have shaped me to be the person I am today. And so, going to a whole new university, a whole new crowd, a whole new setting, it was very intense for me. And so let's talk about the first thing. What was it like having a roommate while I was as an autistic? It was hell. So, my first college, I did have a roommate. I went to high school with this guy, and we had very different routines, and I'm very routine, regimental, and when you have someone who has like an opposite routine or kind of one that infringes on yours, it's not great. It's not great. So I'd be wanting to go to bed, like 11 o'clock. He'd be playing video games until 2 a.m. I'd get up at like 7 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock. He'd still be in bed, so I felt like I was tiptoeing everywhere. And just kind of having that friction of not being able to kind of do my routine in my space, it really got to me. And even within a couple of weeks of time, it built up and really became almost a detrimental kind of thing in my mind. Also, I stopped doing cross-country very, very early in my time there. I was not meshing with a lot of the teammates. They had a very different kind of mentality. They definitely came from have a different mindset. I came from a group of people when I was growing up that was very quirky, very offbeat, kind of outcasters, and that's kind of what I was, and I related to that. They accepted me for who I was as an autistic. They had known me at the time and kind of understood where I was coming from and why I behaved the way I did. I didn't really get that when I was in this new setting. You had a bunch of guys with jock mentality, only wanted to party when they weren't running, and really just didn't have, we didn't have the same mindset, and me just kind of being in that, and with that mob mentality, everyone trying to be exactly like the other person just to kind of make it through, didn't really click with me. And so I just felt like this huge misfit. There would be times where I would actually be crying, in my own time, just like how little I fit in here. And eventually I left the team, and honestly, classes weren't going so hot for me. I was really having a hard time adjusting to this more intense setting. And even my coach back in high school was like, I don't think Shane's ready for this. He didn't tell me this for a few years later. He pretty much admitted that I was not ready for college based off of things that he saw. So now, a couple weeks into my experience at University of Oshkosh, I dropped out of school. My mental health really started taking a toll, and this was arguably when the bipolar started setting in. A lot of cases with bipolar, it really doesn't start setting in until your adult life. At this point, there would be episodes of suicidal thoughts and all of that. I would be in raging tears, and I didn't understand why. So at this point, I'm not fitting in, I'm not meshing in, I'm not getting into the groove of things. So ultimately, less than 3 weeks into college, I dropped out. Packed all my stuff, went back and lived with mom and dad. And at this point, I had a few months in between, with what would have been time in school. So at this point, I'm working. It's pretty uneventful, and then I on to my second university, which was University of Wisconsin Parkside, and that was a very uneventful experience. It was very inoffensive, which at the time actually really worked well for me, because basically it was a school where people really commuted. They got in and they got out, so really there wasn't a lot of pressure for me to kind of have to socialize or really get into group mentality. Really, I could just get in a routine of going to my classes, going to my job at the time, which was actually helping autistic kids. There was a mix of me working with the company, helping autistic kids, and working at an Olive Garden. And just having that routine was very ideal for me. And the fact that I knew people from high school there really made me comfortable. It was a much smoother transition into the university setting. And again, my time at this commuter school was extremely uneventful. More stuff going on in my outside life than really in school. You know, I really didn't have to worry about... And again, it was really nice because no one really there wanted to socialize. They wanted to get to their classes, the ones that they couldn't skip. Because let's be real here, a lot of us skip classes. I skip classes like crazy and I still somehow pass with a B. So, I didn't feel really any pressure on that aspect of things. But now at this point, I'm like, okay, I want to give going away to university another chance. And I felt like I was a lot more prepared for that. My mental health was good. I was kind of comfortable with who I was, where I was at with things, and I made the move to go complete schooling at University of Wisconsin-Stevens Point. Now, this is where the story really kicks in. This is where the rambles and all that are going to really kick in. First of all, long story short, I did not fit in with this university. I was very different than a lot of the people up there. You know, I don't know, it was just a very different mindset and a very different kind of group of people. And that's not bad at all. But it was something that I really couldn't click with. I was very my way or the highway. You know, if you didn't think like me, if we didn't see eye to eye, because had that idea like you had to kind of think the way I did. It was weird at the time. It was weird. But I really didn't fit in. And I thought that I was going to do a lot more fitting in because essentially I went to this university because my best friend at the time went there and I got to meet his crew of people and I liked them and I thought that was going to be a lot more of what the university was, you know, people who were interested in art and music and all of that, and that was a very small percentage and I met most of that percentage there. So again, not fitting in right away on this. Go to the university, right away, I actually joined their track team. And the same thing happened there than it did at the other university. Just a whole different mentality, modern mentality. Everyone trying to be exactly like the other person. Lots of partying and stuff. And honestly, at the time, that's something I wasn't really into yet. And at this point, I'm really trying to fit in. I didn't want to have another Oshkosh experience where I was just so extremely offset. I wanted to be a part of something, so I really tried to fit in with this group of people that I really couldn't. And it was really hard for me. A lot of people, without me even saying it, did kind of figure that I might be autistic, that there was something wrong with me or something off about me. And a little into this experience now, I started Stevens Point in January, so I spent a year back at home and I started January. By March, I'm already starting to notice that stuff's really starting to happen. I started getting waves of depression, waves of feeling low, starting to have suicidal thoughts. I had one of my first manic episodes at a track meet. And at the time, we all thought it was just depression. And this is really when mental illness took a toll on some of my passions. So I had this manic episode at this meet, what we call a track event and all of that, where literally I'm having waves of suicidal thoughts. I'm crying and under staircases and just losing all motivation to do things that I really loved a long time ago. And after that race, I dropped out of the team. And this cycle of depressive episodes, manic episodes, really started taking effect the next semester. And so now next semester comes fall semester, and not only am I just still having a really hard time fitting in, having a hard time socializing with people, now I'm having these manic waves where I'm doing things what I'm not even thinking about. And then I'm feeling suicidal after. And this is the thing that keeps going round and round and round and round. Now, let's add another factor. And at this point in college, because I'm just really not happy with my mind and I'm looking to escape, I start using various stuff. I start partying. I start smoking pot. And that doesn't help with mental illness. That doesn't help at all. But at the time, I was like, okay, this is a good escape and makes things a little more bearable. And it just kept making it worse and worse. So now, fast forward to around Christmas of that year, and this would be 2017. I almost killed myself a couple times when I was driving home from Stevens Point back to visit the family for Christmas. I almost lost control of my car and would almost drive into telephone poles. And I am just bawling and bawling this entire drive home. And I come home in tears. I'm like, I want to die. I don't want this anymore. I'm planning on hurting myself. And I get taken to the hospital. They put me into a mental hospital kind of deal, rehabilitation center. And at this point, they're questioning me and all of that. And the next day, this doctor finds me in my little room, and I'm writing. I'm just writing stuff down because, for those who don't know, I'm a musician. I write my own stuff and all that, poems, all of that. So here I am, just in this little suite, just penning down, penciling down everything. Well, markering down, because you couldn't have pencils or pens in a rehab. You had to have things that weren't going to poke or stab yourself, or others. So I'm just pinning down. Doctor calls me in. He's like, Shane, my office. I felt like the principal kind of walked in, right? And he's like, you have classic bipolar, type 2 bipolar. I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. Excuse me, you got to be kidding me. So that was its own kind of thing. Now we're adding medication to the mix, and I'm still prescribed this to this day. I'm on lamotrigine and I'm on quetiapine, which lamotrigine is a mood stabilizer and quetiapine is an antipsychotic. And at this point in my life, in my experience, I kind of just let go of a lot of things. I'm just like, at this point, well, shit. If I'm going to become physically dependent on my quetiapine and feel like I have to take this every day, and lamotrigine, if I don't take that, I'm having some bad times. I don't care what else I put in my body. So at this point, I started having a drinking problem. And that made my manic episodes and mood swings even more severe. And you don't want to mix that stuff with your medication. I did that all the time. Now at this point in my college career, my manic episodes are getting worse. And to cope with the fact that still I'm autistic and I'm having a hard time fitting in with people, I'm getting blackout drunk probably 4 times a week. To the point where I'm throwing up, like 3 or 4 times a week. And I had a couple of friends at the time that we would kind of party and do all of that stuff with, but it was really hard for me to find really anyone else. I'm still friends with the one guy today, and I'm convinced he's on the spectrum, and that's why I kind of got along with him, And there was a point where my bipolar got so bad, with my drinking getting really bad, where pretty much I lost all of my friends. And just being isolated already, knowing that I have a hard time making friends because of my autism. I can't maintain friendships because of my mood swings and mania, that it just kept getting worse and worse. The mood swings and all of that. Now let's fast forward a little bit to the next semester. I move out of the dorms. By the way, I should specify that when I moved and started going to school in Stevens Point, I was fortunate enough to be able to opt into having my own room. So I didn't have a roommate my entire time when I lived in the dorms, which was great. That helped me out a lot. I was able to kind of control my space, be able to go to bed when I needed to without any inconveniences or obstacles. Same for waking up. I had control of my space. I could do what I needed to do in there. So now we're going to throw the roommate challenge back in. Something I couldn't do at Oshkosh with my first university. But now I live in a house with 8 people. 8 people. That's right. I think it was like 6 dudes and 2 chicks. But they were like tomboys, so I like to say that I lived with 8 dudes. So, and it was a house that did not influence me in the best way. Lots of partying, lots of all of that stuff, I don't have to say much on that. You know, we were 20, 21 years old, being loud and stupid and all that. But even then, I still had a hard time meshing in with these guys. Very fortunate enough that I'm still good friends with a couple of these guys, you know, great human beings that I actually got to see this last weekend. And it's a blessing that I was able to build these relationships over the year, over my time there, and maintain them. That's something I wasn't able to do beforehand. But it was one of the hardest things because I was ignored a lot, you know. I didn't really mesh with a lot of these guys at first either. And one of the hardest things for me at that time was being in a room with 8 people, with so many people, and none of the sound and conversation is directed to you. So you're just like a entity just watching these conversations, hoping that I could chime in at a point and kind of put my input in, and hoping they turn their attention to me and that I can have some dialogue. And it made me very, very lonely when that wasn't the case. And there'd be many nights I would cry myself to sleep. My suicidal thoughts kept getting worse and worse. My isolation and self-hate got worse and worse. I stopped caring about my classes. I started skipping classes more, in classes that I should not have been skipping. I started getting yelled at by professors. And I tried to pull oh yeah, I'm autistic thing and I struggle with bipolar, but that wasn't enough. And it continued having this negative impact on me to where, again, the suicidal thoughts were really strong. Like, there was a while where I couldn't look at a telephone pole while driving, or I'd start tearing up because I wanted to crash my car into that thing. That's how bad it was. I would think about ways of doing it, you know, committing suicide. And crap, man. Again, this is a very vulnerable video for me, so if I have to stop for a second and just kind of collect my thoughts, I have to do it. Now at this point, it's now beginning of 2019. It was after my birthday, and I decided to stop drinking alcohol. And that was the last time I drank alcohol in college. And I started noticing improvements. Not a whole lot, but mainly on the mental health aspect of things. Not so much on the social aspect, but in the mental health. A lot of the suicidal thoughts started kind of getting a lot less to non-apparent at all. And I was a bit more present, but I felt like I was able to kind of talk more and be around people, which is completely interesting because I felt like the only way to do that was, you know, partying and all of that, just because I thought, hey, as an autistic and taking a social lubricant such as alcohol, it would make me a lot more sociable than the person that I couldn't be because I was autistic. It actually made me more antisocial and dissociated. I actually wanted to make a video on an autistic's reaction to various substances. I think that would be a really cool kind of study to show, hey, how does something that is mind-altering, and if that affects someone who's autistic and the relationship between that and the person itself. So if you want to see that, drop a comment down on that. I would love to make a video on that. I think it's a really interesting kind of tangent for me to go on that I don't want to do in this video. But it was funny, because at this point I'm starting to talk more with my roommates and we're finding things to talk about, but I'm still very distant. And it was funny, because at that point, my friend admitted to me, who I'm still very good friends with now, he was like, Shane, I'm going to be real with you. You were an asshole when I met you. I'm like, yeah, that's very, very fair. Because I was an asshole, and to kind of highlight on that, not only was I just dissociated and antisocial, I was mean. Like, it was a defense mechanism. Because I almost didn't trust anyone around me because I felt like they were out to get me. They saw me as weak because of my mental illness. And I kind of just turned away from that and blamed the whole world for my situation. And it turned into this very sinister mentality that made me very distant from everyone because they weren't accepting me. And this is a very toxic mentality. So like, it was almost like, screw the world because the world doesn't like me. The world is the reason I'm in this place right now. It's almost a very Joker-like mentality, like the Joker, the movie that came out a few years ago with Joaquin Phoenix. I can't talk right now, guys. I can't talk right now. Save me. Dear God. I'm never gonna forgive myself for that one. But it was almost that kind of mentality, like I retaliate against the world because of where they put me. And I had to let go of that because that's up to me. And I realized I was the one who put myself in that situation, no one else. And once I kind of let that go, I became a little bit more sociable. But still, I really didn't fit in. And I still kind of felt like a bit of an outcast, and that kind of just that just distance between what a lot of people, the culture of Stevens Point, what a lot of that was, it was a lot more, I guess you can say more conservative, a little more simple, you know, and I don't know, I was always a lot more of a thinker, a lot more of a questioner and all of that, someone who wanted to have more of those in-depth, borderline philosophical conversations. Granted, I did graduate with a philosophy degree, so that might be why, and I felt like I couldn't have those kind of conversations with people, and so that kind of made me more dissociated. So now let's fast forward to kind of like the end of my college experience, and at this point, it's pretty much still kind of my last semester. So my last semester is very similar to everything else, and this is where everything mattered. This is where I had to be sociable. This is where I had to be a team player. I just didn't do it because I had to. I was focusing on all my stuff for my minor, for my professional writing minor. And we had this whole group that ran a student-run bookstore, or a publishing company, whatever. And I had to be a voice. I had to be someone who was communicating. And I didn't do that. And a lot of people got pissed off at me for that. So, I'm not saying at the end of my time in college I was cured and this is some coming-of-age story or me being some Renaissance man or something like that. I still had a long journey to go. And I'm trying to think of anything else I want to say. Yeah, I mean, I'm very blessed I graduated because when I was diagnosed with autism, it was never believed that I was going to graduate or go to school or any of that. So I looked at that as a win, even though I hated college. I hated it. But I look fondly at, I'm rambling at this point, so I think I'm gonna, actually, what's crazy is the friends that I made in college, I didn't even go to college with. I worked at a Quick Trip gas station for most of my time in college, and I made most of my friends through that. I spent more time doing stuff with my work and with people at work, outside of work, than at the university itself. Spent more time working than doing school, more time with the people at work than the people on campus. So, again, yeah, that's what it was like having bipolar and autism in college, and that's all I got to say about that. I'm sure there's things that I forgot that I'm going to be being like, oh crap, I forgot to mention that in the uploading process and all of that. So, again, at this point, I'm rambling. I want to thank you all for tuning in to this episode of Shane's Squirrel Shack. If you like what you heard, give it a like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys want to hear next. You guys are what fuels my idea, the creative juices inside of my mind to be able to keep doing what I do. So thank you again. You all have a wonderful day and stay nuts.